Hello everyone. I know I'm a minute early, so we will get started in a couple of minutes as people arrive. I hope everyone is looking forward to their July 4th weekends upcoming, the long weekend. I realize that we might have a lesser showing tonight since everyone is on their way to their July 4th celebrations, perhaps their weekends away, their fireworks. So anyway, but we are here today to talk about secondary essays. And I'm just going to pull up our Facebook group because I know there were some specific questions posted in the Facebook group ahead of time. I love it when people do that. And in that way, we can just go ahead and get started and just sort of kick things off by answering those questions. Okay, hold on 1 minute. So anyway, for those of you who don't know me, let me just go ahead and introduce myself. Okay, one second. Okay, a lot of comments here, good. Okay, so my name, for those of you who don't know me, is Dr. Jessica Freedman, and I am the chair and founder of MedEdit's Medical Admissions. We have been assisting applicants as they have applied to medical school residency and fellowship, postbac programs, special master's programs for the past 17 plus years. I founded MedEdit after I left the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, where I was on faculty. I practiced emergency medicine there. I was on the emergency medicine faculty, worked in residency admissions, and also worked on the medical school side. I ran a course. I worked on the med school admissions committee. So anyone who understands academic medicine knows that you wear multiple hats. You play a lot of roles in academic medicine, which is one of the things that makes it so fulfilling. But over the past 17 years, we have worked with a huge range of students getting into all types of medical schools all over the country, helping people get into all different specialties in medicine. And through that work, we have learned a ton. I have, gathered the most talented people out there to help our students as they apply to medical school. We have an outstanding editorial team. And so it's really exciting what is going on here. We are ready here at MedEdit for our 2025-2026 application cycle that just started. We already have students who have medical school interviews. We have residency applicants who just started their internships, their first year of residency on July 1st officially. And then of course, we have students who are getting ready to start medical school, most of whom who have committed to enroll at this point. We have a couple lingering students who are waiting to see if they get in off a couple of different wait lists depending on when their commit to enroll dates are, but pretty much everyone is set and knows what their plans are for the upcoming year. So that then allows us to now, 100% dive in with our 2025-2026 applicants. We are super excited to see what this year brings. Every year is different. This year is no different as well. There are going to be changes. There are going to be trends. We love observing those trends so that we can help everyone and offer the most up-to-date guidance based on our past experience working privately, based on our past experience working in formal academics, and based on what we see happening in real time and following what's going on in the news. And I realize that there is a lot going on in the news right now. I know on everyone's minds are questions about funding, about financial aid, resources. We have to see what happens with all of that. I do think the private sector is going to, fill those gaps when students need some financial assistance. So we're going to be watching that carefully as well. I know it's a stressful time for everybody. So we are with you, and we will do everything possible that we can to help. Okay, so let me just start reviewing the secondary essay prompts that were posted in the group. Because I know that people have questions, and then if you do have any specific prompts that you'd like me to discuss, and I printed out a bunch, based on the work we're doing with our current students. And, I really love talking through secondary essay prompts, because secondary essay prompts, what they do is they give you a real sense of what is important to the medical school. So, something that someone posted in the Facebook group recently was, how can we possibly distinguish all these different medical schools' missions? Because they all sound the same. And, they really do all sound the same. After you read a bunch of them, there are a few that stand out if they have very, very specific and focused missions, but the majority of medical schools' missions sound very similar. So what secondary essays do is they offer the opportunity to understand what's really important to the medical school, because those medical schools are only going to ask questions based on two different factors. They're going to ask questions based on what is important to them, based on their values, based on their ideals, and then they are going to ask questions based on the gaps that they see in students' applications. So one of the things that we explain to our applicants is that because we ensure our applicants are composing very comprehensive primary applications that capture everything medical school admissions committees would like to see, sometimes they are forced to repeat information in their secondary essays that might be covered elsewhere in their application. That's okay, as long as the secondary essay prompt doesn't specifically ask you not to cover anything that is already covered in your primary application. There are some secondaries that will say that. Please do not write about anything that is addressed elsewhere in your application. But we always have our students are always having to repeat topics in their secondary essays because the questions require them to do that. So lesson number one, when you are completing secondary essays, answer the prompt, don't veer away from the prompt. I probably say this when I'm working on student secondaries and reviewing their responses. I'm saying this every single time I review a secondary. This veers away from the prompt. You're telling them what you'd like to tell them, but you're not telling them what they are actually asking. And so you want to just make sure that even if you have to offer a little bit of background information for context, you want to make sure that your response addresses the question and only answers the question. Okay, so I'm going to go through these and just reply to them. So question number one is from FSU, Florida State University. It is, these two essays are a max of 500 words, okay? And why is the word or the character limit important to us? It is important to us, it is important to you, because it gives you a sense of how much information the medical school wants from you. So very, very generous limits are going to tell you they want a lot of information. They want a very, very comprehensive response. A very short take, 100 words, 200 words, they just want you to be short and sweet and direct. Okay, so use those limits as a general guide for how long your response should be in terms of how much depth you should be going into. So FSU asks two questions. Number one, please provide a description of your family. This is a completely open-ended question, and I love open-ended questions because they allow you to take that question any way you want to take that question, and they're designed that way. They are asking a general question like this because they want to understand to you, what does family mean? How do you define family, right? Many people define family in a non-traditional sense. Some people, most people think of the nuclear family. They think of the parents, the children, but think of all the different types of families that exist out there. Some people have step-parents. Some people may, have parents who didn't actually give birth to them, right? Some people are adopted. Some people have extended families where they're spending a lot of their time with extended families. Maybe some people are even in situations where they consider their family to be people who aren't related to them by blood. So maybe people consider their family to be their friends or people whom they've met along the way or mentors. So when you're asked a question like this, what is key is that you're authentic, right? I'm gonna say this repeatedly. It's always important to be authentic, but also think outside the box. Don't think that you have to answer in a traditional sense. Now, if you grew up in a very typical household, and, say that I grew up in, suburban New Jersey, with my parents, with my older brother, and, we would celebrate holidays with the extended family. Typically at our house, we would have Thanksgiving at our house. We would have another holiday at my aunt and uncle's house. So you want to what were those family dynamics? Our family holiday dinners were defined by intellectual debates or political debates. Add some color to this. So it really gives the reader a sense of what was it like to sit around that dinner table. So, kind of think outside the box and be honest in answering this question. Question number 2, please provide a description of where you grew up, rural area, large city, etc. Again, be honest. Now, this is also why we like students when they're working on primary applications to offer a bit of context for where they're from, how they grew up, where they grew up, because we know, and this is further evidence of that, we know that, look, physicians, people who are working in admissions, we like to know people's backgrounds. We are taking medical histories all day long. As clinicians, this is what we do. So this is kind of like your history of present illness, so to speak, if we were to talk in medical terms. So again, when describing where you grew up, explain it, describe it. Make the reader be able to sort of picture themselves in your town or your city. Or maybe you grew up in more than one place. Maybe you moved around a bit. And what did it look like? Where were your favorite places to go? What would you do on weekends with your friends? So again, this is kind of your opportunity to create some really nice imagery and some, really great description about where you grew up. And, that's going to draw your reader in and make them want to meet you. And that's always the goal with all of these essays, is that you want to inspire your reader to meet you. And, I love those questions for FSU. That's great. Okay. All right. Someone asked, what are specific ways to approach the why school essays without making them sound vague and generic? So as we look at secondary essays every year, so many medical schools ask why our school. Okay. The way that you don't make them vague and generic, and this is a great question, because yes, when we read a lot of why our school secondary essays, we find them to be very vague and very generic, like anybody could have written that essay. So the key thing when you're writing why our school essays is specifics. So you want to identify specific reasons that you want to attend that medical school, and you would like you want those specifics to be related to your interests. And so you don't sort of want, if there's something, let's say you're just really curious about, it's fine to bring up something that you have zero experience in. That's fine. But ideally you want to try to bring up things that you can show evidence for your interest in. So whatever you have done prior to applying to medical school, or whatever you are doing during a gap year or during the year that you're applying, try to identify those things. Find the things at that medical school that are related to what you are already doing. What initiatives are there? What research is being done? If you identify things about the curriculum, and that's fine too, because it shows that you've looked into what that curriculum is, which is good. It shows you've done research on your medical school, but a lot of applicants are going to be mentioning those specifics about the curriculum. So you don't want an entire essay to be about the curriculum, because then that is definitely going to make you blend in. You want to make it clear that you are going to go to that medical school. There are so many things going on that you want to get involved in, and that you have a really clear vision of how you're going to get involved. Now, if those interests change, if you end up not having those interests when you're there, that's okay. You're not committing yourself to anything, but you want to show that you are going to be, and not only an active participant, but that you're going to be a contributor to that medical school, to that medical school class, to that medical community. So also keep in mind that a lot of your time when you're in medical school is spent in the hospital. It's spent working with other people. It's not spent with your classmates. This is very, very different than college in terms of, how you're going to be spending your time and who you're going to be interacting with. So keep that in mind. They want to know that you're going to, really be engaged and really making an impact, even once you're out of the classroom, the formal classroom? Good question. Okay. All right, this is a great question. So a question that asks, if applicable, please tell us about any special circumstances related to COVID-19 that could help us to understand you better. And the question is it appropriate to reflect on how the pandemic affected your community and family in general, even if you didn't suffer personal hardship? So the question is, how should you approach prompts that ask about COVID-19 and if there are any special circumstances that, impacted you with regards to COVID-19? Now, many of the students whom we are working with now, they experienced COVID in high school, actually. They were, high school seniors when COVID happened. Some certainly were in college. I think that the COVID-19 questions are likely to drop off in the next year or two, but as long as they are still there, my feeling is that you should only be answering the COVID questions if you were truly impacted by it. Did somebody get sick? Was there any real hardship related to COVID? But if the impact on you was sort of more traditional, meaning, you had to stop doing all of your in-person activities, you had to, your school, wherever you were in school, went online and you no longer had in-person classes. Anything that was sort of more typical, I would write it that way. And it shouldn't be a long explanation. The impact of COVID, on me was that our classes went online. I had to stop all my in-person activities. Thankfully, no one in my family got sick and we were all safe, right? And if it's an optional question, don't feel you need to answer it. Because again, medical school admissions committees now we all understand what we all went through during COVID. So they don't need to hear that anymore. They're sick of hearing it, okay? So please don't go on and on and on about how COVID impacted you, assuming it was just a typical impact, like it impacted everybody else. Okay, this is a good question. For out-of-state applicants, how should they best answer this question? If you are a non-state resident, you are required to elaborate on your state ties if applicable. So when a school is asking this question about your ties to the state, they want to understand your loyalty to that state. What that is telling me is that medical school is primarily looking to educate people from in-state. And so this means that the people whom they are taking from out of state need to have some type of affiliation to that state. So did you go to college in that state? Do you have family in that state? Have you spent a lot of time in that state, either working or with your extended family? So to me, what this is telling you is if your answer to this is, I have no ties to the state, maybe that's not a school you should be applying to. That would be the indication to me. I'd love to know what school that is, because I don't know off the top of my head what school that is. Okay. All right. This is a good question. How do you most effectively use the anything else you need to know if the school already asks why us? So for optional prompts, is there anything else you need us to know, you'd like us to know, completely optional? Sometimes what students do, if there is not a why us question, they will use this anything else you'd like us to know prompt to explain why they're specifically interested in the medical school. My feeling is that if you have told this school everything you want them to know that is going to make you a strong applicant, don't dilute your application by just filling in the space. In general, optional questions are optional. I hope I get to the secondary prompts that I pulled. I hope I have time to do that. So I can go over some secondary essay prompts with you that are considered optional that I don't consider optional. But if there's, the questions, is there anything else you'd like us to know? I do think that those are truly optional prompts. I can tell you, reading applications, there are going to be a lot of people who skim your application. They need to be convinced that you are worthy of being invited for an interview. So if you have presented a convincing argument, so to speak, a strong application, then there probably is nothing else you need to tell them. So don't feel badly. Don't feel like you have to fill every space in the application. Sometimes less is more. Okay. how do we answer the question that asks, how will you be contributing to the school? So questions that ask, how do you plan to contribute to our medical school? These are really important questions, and they are sort of another version of why us. They want to know that you are going to be making an impact as a student. They know you are not just going to go there, go to class, study, go home, and just do what you have to do to get by. They want to know that you have specific interests, that you are going into that medical school knowing what you'd like to get involved with based on what you've already done, what you've already accomplished. Hopefully you can identify numerous things going on at that medical school that are related to your interests, related to things that you have already achieved, that you have already been deeply involved in before as a pre-med. And so those are really important questions. Why are school questions? How do you plan to contribute to our medical school? These are all really important questions because you want to make it clear that you are going to be a fully invested, engaged, participatory, impactful medical student at that medical school. So, okay. Oh, I like this prompt. Okay, describe a time when you asked for help within the last 5 years and what you learned from it. 600 characters. This is Vanderbilt. Would it be okay to discuss a situation where you asked for help on behalf of someone else? No, I would do this. A prompt like this needs to be about you when you asked for help. So there are a lot of things that go into this prompt, okay? Let me kind of talk about them. So first of all, I can tell you as an attending, I would way rather have a student or resident who came to me for help because they had reached the limitations of their knowledge or their ability. And I want them to be able to recognize that rather than just forging ahead and taking care of a patient when maybe they weren't best equipped to take care of that patient. So it is really important to have that insight, to have that self-awareness, and to be able to take the initiative to ask for help. This is a great question. So, and to show that you're not afraid to ask for help, to show that you could be vulnerable. So I would choose a situation here that demonstrates vulnerability, that demonstrates how you utilize your outside resources. And then that demonstrates how do you then incorporate whatever guidance you received, whatever help you got, how you then incorporated that help, that guidance, who you went to, how you incorporated that guidance, and then what happened with the situation, right? So it's about your resourcefulness. It's about that you can reflect. It's about that you can recognize your own limitations. There's so many things that go into this prompt. So yeah, I love that question. It's a great question. Thank you, Melanie. Okay. Another good question. Okay, this is Baylor 2000 characters. Any other circumstances to help us understand you, including prevailing over adversity? Now, I'm assuming that this is an optional prompt, okay, because not everybody's had adversities. If you can let me know, Melanie, if you're watching, if that is an optional prompt or if this is a required prompt. So usually questions of this nature are going to be optional because not everybody has had exceptional circumstances that they've had to overcome. Melanie's specific question would it be okay to discuss how he learned to deal with Tourette's? In his case, mild, so most people wouldn't even know he had it, and it hasn't interfered with academics or extracurriculars. I think that would actually be a great topic. So anything that you have had to overcome, any type of diagnosis, any type of financial hardship, illness in the family, anything of that nature is definitely something that I would discuss. Required prompt, but limited to adversity. Okay, so this is a required prompt. Any other circumstances to help us understand you, including. Okay, so then the way that I would read this, since it's a required prompt, and I'm wondering if this is the full prompt, Melanie, if you can just type that into the chat so I can just see the absolute full prompt. But then the way I interpret this question, since it's required, what other circumstances will help us to understand you? So that then becomes a really open-ended question. So this can be anything that helps them to understand you. You could take that question about your background and your upbringing and, you know, your family and what your family environment was like and use that for this, because that helps them to understand you. That helps them to, you know, to really picture who you are, how you grew up, the circumstances behind, you know, kind of your childhood, right? So yeah, that's good. But I think Melanie's going to look up the full prompt, so maybe I can come back to that and address that when she gives the full prompt. But yeah, if it's required, I knew there had to be another part of the prompt, because if it was only about adversity, it wouldn't have been required, because not everyone's had adversity. Okay, now I'm going to move on to some secondary essays that we have been working on with students. The first one that I will go over is the Einstein School of Medicine. So, and this is a prompt that appears in a lot of places. And so let's just go over it once. And then if it appears again in another secondary I go over, I won't talk about it. But once, you know, one of their questions is, I have taken at least a year off from school since college graduation, including this year that I am applying to medical school. If you answer yes to this question, please explain your activities during the time off. 3,000 characters. So these questions about what are you doing this year if you're not currently enrolled in school, or have you taken time off, answer these in a very, very direct way. Again, looking at the character limit to give you a sense of how much information they want from you. So with 3,000 characters, that's a pretty generous limit. Maybe they are also accounting for the fact that there are some applicants who've taken off more than 1 year, 2 or 3 years. They have a lot to account for. So you want to write about everything you have been participating in. Again, very straightforward. All of these activities are most probably going to be included in your primary application, so it's fine to repeat them. You know, and it also, to me, makes sense to try to write about this chronologically, so it's very easy for the reader to follow. And you can write about, you know, your impact that you've made through each of these activities that you've been involved with, or even what you hope to accomplish through these experiences that you're involved with this year. Very straightforward. Another Einstein question: I have taken and received credit for online science core classes that were taken prior to the COVID pandemic, earlier than spring 2020 and or after June 2023. If yes, 3,000 characters max. So again, as you know, I think many of you know, medical schools would rather you not take online science classes. Sometimes there are prevailing circumstances that require a student to take online classes. For example, if your undergraduate institution offers a summer class that is online and you get credit at your undergraduate institution and you needed to take a class over the summer in order to fulfill all of your prerequisites in time for you to apply, that to me is a valid reason for taking an online class. So they just want a good explanation for why you took an online core science class. So just offer a very straightforward, no nonsense, why did you take that online science class? And that's going to be great. Okay, Einstein question number 3. What unique life experiences, personal attributes, and or perspectives will you bring as part of the incoming class? Are there particular challenges or successes that you have encountered? If you do not wish to write anything, please enter NA. Okay, so this is one of those optional questions that is not optional, okay? This is such an open-ended question that you need to have something to write for this, okay? Let's kind of analyze this prompt. What unique life experiences, personal attributes, and or perspectives will you bring as part of the incoming class? Now, you can certainly use this as an opportunity to write about any challenges, you know, or successes that you have encountered, okay? So this is so open-ended that the key thing here is to consider this within the context of the incoming class. Again, they are looking to understand how you are going to contribute to that incoming class. What perspectives are you going to bring? What distinctive skills or distinctive talents or distinctive outlooks are you going to bring? How is that going to enrich the incoming class? How do you hope to educate your classmates or help your classmates or contribute to discussions in the classroom or maybe in the simulation lab? So it's really a two-part question, and you want to make sure you address both parts of that question, all right? So to me, an optional question like this is really an opportunity for you to stand out and to make it clear that you're going to be a really active participant at that medical school and that you're really going to be making very valuable contributions. This is a great opportunity question. I love it. Okay. Einstein question number 4. Please use this space to tell us anything about yourself that you would like us to know. If you do not wish to write anything, please write NA. So, assuming that you have answered Sinai's prompt number 3 well, right, and you've taken full advantage of those 3,000 characters, to me, there's nothing else that you should be writing about in for prompt number 4. I think leaving that blank is perfectly fine. Especially since they're asking you about, in question number 1, they're asking you about gap years and, time since graduating college. So if you've accomplished anything since submitting your application, you can include it there. If you wanted instead to include any recent accomplishments since submitting your application, and you didn't have space or you chose not to include it in prompt number 1, that's something you could include in prompt number 4. But I would say that for the majority of applicants, they will not be completing Einstein prompt number 4. Okay. I haven't even looked if anyone has any questions, but if you have any specific prompts you would like me to address, you can go ahead and post them. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going here, because I've got a lot of good prompts. Okay, let's move south. Let's mix it up a little. Okay, Emory. Number 1, list your entire curriculum plan for the 2024-2025 academic year. If you are not in school, please briefly describe your plans for the upcoming year. Great question. 200 words. Short take. Straightforward. What are your curricular plans? What courses do you plan to take? Do you plan on writing a thesis? Are you involved in a capstone project if you're in school? If you are not in school, what are you doing? How are you going to be spending your time? Be comprehensive in responding to this. Straightforward answers. Number 2 for Emory. Briefly describe health-related experiences. Be sure to include important experiences that are in your AMCAS application, as well as any recent experiences. So again, this is a way that they just want to make sure that you have had health-related experiences. Okay? This can be anything. This can be obviously clinical work, paid clinical work. This can be any type of patient-facing experience, whether that is community service, whether that is a formal summer program where you were exposed to different patients through shadowing. This can be any variety of experiences that are health-related. I would say that even clinical research, assuming that you had experience either with medical professionals, if you did retrospective work, or if you work directly with patients, I think that can be included there as well. Don't feel that you need to elaborate. You're only allowed 200 words here. So you will, again, want to be fairly concise. Question number 3. Briefly describe your interest in Emory and the Emory degree that you have selected. 200 words. Very, very short prompt. So you need to be, not short prompt, short limit. Short prompt too, but okay. So you need to be very direct. You can't offer any background information, no context. Boom. Why are you interested in Emory? What are you going to get involved with there? What initiatives do they have? What student groups do they have? What research? Just explain why you're interested in the medical school. You don't have to explain the evidence for that interest. Not necessary. They don't give you the space. They'll see that evidence in your primary application. Okay, Emory question number 4. Emory School of Medicine is committed to recruiting and educating medical students who will help deliver quality healthcare and will promote the health of our patients. In our community, this includes learning about and addressing the healthcare needs of our most underserved populations. Please describe any of your activities that have been in service to underserved communities. What does this tell you? This tells you that one of Emory's core values is service to underserved populations. So if you don't have any of those experiences, that should be a message that maybe Emory is not going to be the best fit for you. They may not see you as the best fit for them. So these experiences can include anything. You don't have to be, involved in healthcare related to underserved communities. This can be outreach. This can be advocacy. This can be any community service you've done, tutoring, any kind of obviously public health work, but any kind of outreach or advocacy trying to reach communities that don't have resources to show that you are committed to serving those populations. Okay. Emory question number 5, if you have any updates or new information to report since you have submitted your application, please describe below. Now, because just like the other, essays we went over, if you don't have, since they specifically asked that question, when you describe what you're doing during the current year, I would just describe what you're doing during the current year. And then if you have any updates or recent accomplishments, I would save those, since there's a separate prompt for this, I would save those for question number 5 for Emory. Okay. All right. This is going to be the last one I go over for tonight, unless any of you have any questions. Let's move on to the Midwest, WashU. Okay. Describe in chronological order your activities during the times when you were not enrolled as a full-time student. See, there it is again. What are you doing? What have you done since you weren't in school? Chronological list, 2,000 characters, so I would explain each of those experiences, definitely. Number 2 for WashU, describe a time or situation where you have been unsuccessful or failed. Okay, why is this important? Because in medicine, we all, quote, fail. We all have bad outcomes at one time or another, and it's not easy. So demonstrating that you have resilience, demonstrating that you can learn from your mistakes, demonstrating that you can take feedback and that you aren't going to crumble when you get bad feedback, and that you aren't going to be defensive, and that you aren't going to be reactive. So you want to come up with a time where you have been unsuccessful or failed, where you took whatever that failure or lack of success was, and you tried to reflect on why you failed, why you were unsuccessful. Why did it feel like a failure to you? And then what did you do to improve? What did you do to remedy that situation, or perhaps to succeed the next time you attempted that thing that you failed at? So you want to demonstrate resilience. You want to demonstrate that you can grow, that you can take feedback, that you can incorporate that feedback, and that you can learn, and that you're going to be receptive to feedback, because that is so important as a medical student and as a resident, because there are just going to be times where people are going to give you feedback that you're not going to like. And so you don't want to be defensive. You want to be able to listen, and you want to be able to question. And rather than sort of becoming defensive or making excuses, that you really listen to that feedback, and that you internalize that feedback, and that you then incorporate that feedback. So that's an important question. All right, question number 3. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the Committee on Admissions? Some applicants use this space to describe their unique backgrounds, lived experiences, obstacles, and/or challenges they faced in their journey to medical school. Optional, all right? Now, I think that assuming that your primary application has addressed all of this, maybe it hasn't, right? Again, our students complete very, very comprehensive primary applications. So the majority of them are not going to answer this question. But let's say there's something in your background that you haven't covered that's interesting about you, that you haven't had the opportunity to cover. Like maybe you're a twin, and how has that impacted your life? Or maybe, I'm trying to think of something that maybe might not come up in a primary application, but that's important to you. Maybe there's something that really is vital to sort of your identity or your experience or your perspective that you haven't had the opportunity to address elsewhere in your application. That's what I would include here. In terms of obstacles and/or challenges, for many students, that's going to be in their most impactful. section, their most impactful experiences section. So I think in this section, you could, if assuming you filled that out, you could write something like, yes, you know, I experienced these obstacles growing up, and I've elaborated on them in my most impactful experiences section of my application. It's fine to refer back to something, right? To just let them know, like, look, I read the question. Yes, I have an answer, but it's covered elsewhere. And I don't want to give you more work to do by making you read the same thing twice. So, okay, let me go ahead and see what questions there are, because I do know that I saw some questions coming through. I will try to get to as many of them as I can. Okay, hold on. There are a lot of you here tonight. I'm so happy before a holiday weekend. Thank you for being here. Okay. Okay. I'm only answering questions tonight on secondary essays, so that's our focus tonight. Okay, so Rika asks hardship essay example. So usually a hardship question is going to be an optional question. So if you have a question, Rika, that's a hardship question that is required, my gut is that it's going to be a little bit, the prompt is going to be a little bit more open-ended. So if you could look up that prompt and put it in the chat, then I can address how you would answer that. But usually hardship questions are going to be optional questions. Okay, let me see what else. And, you know, I think this was useful for people. If you can give me feedback on, you know, whether or not this was useful. I think that these kinds of sessions, even if a student isn't applying to medical school this year, I think it can still be useful because, you know, this gives you a sense of what's to come, and it also gives you a sense of why students are engaging in all the experiences that they're engaging in as pre-meds. And I think it also kind of speaks to why we don't take a checklist approach to experiences. I think that this is, I think everyone can benefit, in other words. Okay, great question, Marian. How quickly should you realistically send in secondaries? If a school specifies a return time, you want to abide by that return time. So some schools are going to say, we want this, returned to us in 2 weeks, turn it around in 2 weeks. Otherwise, we want to make sure that you are writing thoughtful, insightful, meaningful documents. We don't want you rushing them. We don't want you sending them back in a day, in 2 days, in a week, in 2 weeks. I can tell you that our students are now getting bombarded with secondary essays. They're going to continue to get bombarded. It is a very overwhelming process. Everyone, I can tell you, pretty much underestimates how much work it is going to be. So we want you submitting quality documents. We are still so early in the process, so don't rush it, okay? Ideally, we want secondary essays, if at all possible, to be completed by the end of the first week of August. We used to say by Labor Day, but now just based on, timelines that we see, kind of everything's been moved up a little bit. And we just see that students have the best results in terms of getting those early interviews, which again, early interviews equals early acceptances, which equals less stress. So if our goal is less stress, then we ideally would like these in by the end of the first week of August, okay? Now, if you have a pending MCAT score, there are going to be many, many medical schools that aren't going to be looking at your application until that MCAT score is in. So for those students, you want your secondary essays to be in before the second MCAT is in. So that way, once the second MCAT is in, your application can go to be fully reviewed. So I thank you all so much for being here. It is a very busy time here as we are working with our students going through secondary. So I'm so sorry that I didn't post our July dates. I will. I will do that. We will do that. I'll have our social media team do that. We're inundated with secondary essays now with all of our students and primaries. We have students working on primaries too. So I don't want you to think that if you're still working on your primary, you're in bad shape. You're okay. So if you're still working on your primary, that's fine. Just be sure that as soon as you submit your primary application that you get started on those secondary essays based on all the prompts. SDN is probably, Student Doctor Network is the best place to get the current prompts for this year. So I thank you all so much for being here. I wish you all a very, very happy and joyous July 4th, a long weekend. Everyone stay healthy, stay safe, and please tune in. I'll see you on the Facebook group, and thank you all so much for being here. Have a great night.